Hello there, this is a video for the 6.12 lesson, Entering a New Millennium. When William Jefferson Clinton was sworn in as the nation's 42nd president in January 1993, the Cold War was over and the United States was the only superpower. Freed from constant competition with the Soviet Union, many Americans hoped the nation could spend more time and money on education, social programs, and health care. But the end of the Cold War did not bring an end to complex foreign policy challenges. New threats emerged to D- New threats emerged and the United States faced a new kind of warfare. Goals for this lesson: identify foreign crises during Clinton's presidency and his administration's response, explain the causes and results of the election dispute in 2000, and describe George W. Bush's major domestic policy initiatives. In lesson resources, grab your reading guide and lesson answer key. And let's turn the page. We're going to read pages 938 through 947. Complete the reading guide, complete the Use What You Know activity, and complete the checkpoint at the end. Okay, starting with a new chapter, Change, Challenge, and Possibility. In January 1993, when Bill Clinton was sworn in as the nation's 42nd president, the writer Maya Angelou read an inaugural poem in which she greeted a new day. With the Cold War over, the Soviet Union dissolved, and the United States the only world's superpower, the country did appear to be entering a bright new era in foreign relations. Some politicians anticipated the benefits of a so-called peace dividend, with fewer entanglements and armed conflicts overseas and reduced anxieties over the threat of nuclear war. The defense budget might be reduced and the savings redirected towards education, social programs, and health care. As Clinton entered the White House, he intended to focus more on matters at home than abroad. Foreign policy is not what I came here to do, he said. From the start, Clinton was confronted by foreign policy challenges. When the Clinton administration gave way to that of George W. Bush in 2001, the nation would confront a new and terrible challenge, an unexpected threat from a new kind of enemy that would make its president shockingly known on September 11th. Clinton in a troubled world. When the Cold War ended and the communist regimes collapsed, people danced in the streets and celebrated. But during the 1990s, in several countries that had been ruled by communist dictators, the celebration gave way to cries of anguish. Ethnic cleansing. Nowhere did the collapse of communism unleash more passions and bloodshed than in the former Republic of Yugoslavia. Civil war broke out between groups deeply divided by religion and ethnicity, including the Serbs, the Croats, and the Muslims. In the newly independent nation of Bosnia, the fighting led to widespread civilian deaths and repeated instances of ethnic cleansing, the forced removal or mass murder of members of an ethnic minority. In particular, Serbian nationals committed widespread atrocities against Bosnia's Muslim citizens. In 1995, at a place called Srebrenica, Serbian troops committed one of the worst atrocities in Europe since World War II, when they massacred more than 7,000 Muslim men and boys, some of them as young as 13. The bloody civil war finally came to an end in the late 1990s, leaving the former Yugoslavia fractured into separate, tensely divided nations. The Clinton administration expressed outrage at the atrocities, but was wary of directly involving the United States in the seemingly endless Balkan conflict. In response to the crisis, Clinton tried to steer a middle course. American F-16 jet fighters based in Italy took part in the NATO-directed airstrikes against the renegade militias, while U.S. diplomats were instructed in the creation of the Dayton Accords. The U.S. diplomats were instrumental in the creation of the Dayton Accords, the 1995 peace agreement that ended the war in Bosnia. Clinton's decision to use air power in Bosnia provoked criticism from different perspectives. Some argued that he should do more to stop the ethnic cleansing, including sending U.S. ground troops. Others believed he should not commit any U.S. resources to a faraway war that did not concern America's strategic interests. Trouble in Haiti. Other troubles simmered closer to home in what had long been the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere, Haiti. The people of Haiti had endured decades of grinding poverty and corrupt, repressive political regimes. In 1991, the country's first democratically elected president, a popular young Catholic priest, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, was forced out of office by a military coup. Over the next few years, thousands of Haitian refugees fled the country. When these boat people tried to enter Florida, many were sent back to Haiti by U.S. officials. The Organization of American States imposed economic sanctions against the new Haitian military regime, including a trade embargo. Haiti's military junta under General Raoul Cedras flagrantly violated political and human rights, including the systematic murder of as many as 3,000 Aristide supporters. In 1994, backed by a United Nations resolution, President Clinton committed U.S. troops to lead a multinational force with the aim of disposing the military junta and restoring Aristide to power. Clinton told General Cedras, "Your time is up. Leave now, or we will force you from power." In Operation Uphold Democracy, as it was called, the United Nations mobilized air, sea, and land forces. As American troops were poised to strike, General Cedras, faced with the prospect of a massive military assault, agreed to negotiate at the last minute. Clinton sent in a team headed by former President Jimmy Carter. On October 1994, Cedras agreed to leave the country. Aristide regained the presidency, and American troops occupied Haiti as a peacekeeping force to be replaced by United Nations troops in 1995. And here we have a picture of refugees called the Boat People fleeing the country. And you'd always hear stories, or every once in a while you'll hear stories of boat people and a terrible tragedy of being lost at sea or drownings and things like that as they were fleeing Haiti. Ongoing efforts for peace in the Middle East. The Clinton foreign policy team inherited ongoing Arab-Israeli peace talks from the Bush administration. Despite the successes of the 1978 Camp David Accords in bringing peace between Israel and Egypt, tensions have escalated between Israel and the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO. The PLO was formed in 1964 to represent the interests of the millions of Palestinians and their descendants dispersed around the Arab world after the formation of the State of Israel in 1948. After Yasser Arafat took over leadership of the PLO in 1969, the PLO often used guerrilla warfare not only against Israeli military targets but also against civilians in Israel. The growing militancy of the PLO prompted the Israeli invasion of Beirut, Lebanon in 1982 to root out PLO strongholds. The ongoing violence was provoked in large part by disputes over land claimed by both Israel and the Palestinians, land where the Palestinians sought to establish an independent Palestinian state. Israel had seized and occupied these areas, including the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, during earlier conflicts with Arab states. After 1978, the PLO argued that Israel had continued to increase settlements in territories that the Camp David Accords had promised to the Palestinians. As long as these lands remained in dispute, there was little likelihood that the violence would end. When Clinton took office, formal negotiations were taking place in Madrid under joint American and Russian sponsorship. But in Oslo, Norway, secret talks were underway in early 1993 between representatives of Israel and the PLO. The Oslo meetings paved the way for an agreement announced in Washington, D.C. on September 13, 1993. In a White House ceremony hosted by President Clinton, Israel and the PLO issued the Oslo Accords, a set of agreements intended to set up the framework for further negotiation. Each side recognized the sovereignty of the other. Israel agreed to acknowledge the PLO as a representative of the Palestinian people, and the PLO agreed to recognize Israel's right to exist. The Palestinians were promised eventual autonomy in an independent Palestinian state and portions of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Yasser Arafat, PLO chairman, and Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin shook hands and agreed that it was time to put an end to decades of confrontation and conflict and live in peaceful coexistence and mutual dignity and security. And here's a picture of Rabin and Yasser Arafat after signing those accords. The promise of peace was short-lived. Both sides violated the terms of the accords. The momentary spirit of Arab-Israeli collaboration swiftly reverted to familiar accusations and diplomatic gridlock. President Clinton, attempting to re-energize the peace process, brought the opposing leaders together for 2 more meetings. But little was accomplished, and after the second meeting, Clinton publicly blamed Arafat and the PLO for the breakdown of negotiations. And on September 2000, the embittered Palestinians began the Second Intifada, or uprising, rejecting for the time being a peaceful path to independence. Somalia and Rwanda. In the last months of his administration, President George H.W. Bush sent 25,000 American troops to lead a UN peacekeeping force in Somalia, a country in northeastern Africa. Ongoing fighting between warring clans had devastated the country's grain-producing regions, leading to widespread famine. The UN force intervened to impose a fragile peace and bring supplies to the starving people. Once the humanitarian mission was over, President Clinton left troops in place to continue efforts at famine relief, rebuilding and suppressing some of the worst warlords. On October 1993, during a raid on one warlord's headquarters, 18 U.S. Army Rangers were killed and 2 Black Hawk helicopters downed. American television viewers were horrified to see footage of the dead bodies of the American servicemen being dragged through the streets of the war-torn city of Mogadishu. Here's a picture of some helicopters arriving in Somalia. The public outcry over this tragic spectacle led Clinton to restrict American combat operations in Somalia the very next day. It was the beginning of the end for the entire UN coalition force, which quit Somalia entirely in 1995. The events in Somalia made the United States and other Western nations reluctant to intervene in the tangled conflicts that continued to break out in African nations. In the spring of 1994, frantic calls for assistance came from the small Central African country of Rwanda. There, in just 100 days, some 800,000 members of the Tutsi ethnic minority were murdered by machete-wielding members of the majority Hutu population. Despite the horrific scale of the well-reported slaughter, such genocidal fury had not been seen since the Nazi era. The Clinton administration did nothing to stop it. Looking back at the administration's policy during the Rwandan genocide, one reporter ruefully summed up, "The decision was not to act, and at that we succeeded greatly." Okay, disputed election of 2000. Before we go that, we want to read about the Oklahoma City bombing. On April 19, 1995, a bomb hidden in a parked truck exploded in front of the Alpha P. Murrah building in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, killing 168 people, including 19 children. The bombing was the worst terrorist attack in the United States prior to September 11, 2001. 2 Americans associated with extremist groups were charged in the attack. Timothy McVeigh, a Gulf War veteran, was unable to find work after leaving the military in anger by what he considered illegal actions by the U.S. government. With an Army friend, Terry Nichols, he became involved in the militia movement in the Midwest. McVeigh and Nichols spent 6 months obtaining materials and planning the Oklahoma City bombing. After leaving the scene of the building, McVeigh was stopped for a traffic violation. He was carrying an illegal handgun for which he was arrested and held in jail. 2 days later, he was formally accused of the bombing and later was brought to trial. McVeigh was found guilty on 11 different counts. He was sentenced to death and executed in June 2001. For his part in the bombing, Nichols received a life sentence. The disputed election of 2000. At the start of Clinton's second term, his vice president Al Gore appeared to have a good chance for a strong run on the presidency in 2000. Gore was an active and popular vice president, an expert in matters ranging from the environment to foreign policy. Then the Monica Lewinsky scandal struck, and Gore, though he won the Democratic nomination in 2000, carried the heavy baggage of Clinton's bad behavior into the race. Deposing him was the son of President George H.W. Bush, the Republican governor of Texas, George W. Bush. The younger Bush had gotten a late start in politics after a career in the oil industry and several years as the owner of the Texas Rangers baseball team. Calling himself a compassionate conservative, he vowed never to embarrass or dishonor the nation, a clear dig at Clinton. He won a following with his well-known name, his air of confidence, and his record of achievement as governor of Texas. On Election Day 2000, Americans turned on their televisions to watch the returns come in and eagerly awaited the announcement of the winner, and kept waiting. The race was agonizingly close. Gore led the popular vote, but the electoral vote came down to one state, Florida. Television news networks predicted the state's electoral votes would go to Gore. Then they changed their minds and predicted Florida's votes would go to Bush. And they realized that the result was simply too close to call. And I'm going to stop here and finish with the video in the next, or the rest of the reading in the next video.